we can go ahead and kick this off. So to get started, we're going to run through a little bit of what Fluent Bit on Windows even is. What does that mean? We're going to talk a little bit about logs. So how do we go collect logs? Windows got a great array of both a system logs. It's got logs in XML file format. How do we go collect those things? We're going to talk about metrics. So one of the fun things I find about Windows is you have a plethora of metrics and customization. So we're going to play around with that a little bit. And then last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about processing. So one of the big things about Fluent Bit is it's not just a collection agent. It's not just grabbing logs. It can do some processing. We can perform some things like excluding, including events, and from there really munging with the data so that it's going to be the most useful for folks. So maybe as a little bit of a high level, right? When we talk about infrastructure today, I think one of the biggest things that we see is there is just this continuous growth of brand new cool places to go send your data, brand new cool places to generate data, whether that's a new SaaS app, whether that's new infrastructure, whether that's a new application that is spun up on an OS. We have this constant struggle and problem of how do we collect this data as fast as possible. And so from a Fluent side, we went and said, how do we solve this from an agent perspective with a lot of the open source Fluent Bit and collection of Fluent Bit and grabbing all of the logs that are necessary there. And likewise, being able to perform many of the activities you might have required a couple of agents for. So maybe you needed something to grab logs. Maybe you had WinLogBeat. Maybe you had something to grab metrics like a WMI collector, and maybe you had Windows Exporter. All of these things that might require 4 or 5 processes to go and build on top of how could we do it with a single Fluent Bit. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I will really just jump straight into a kind of our session here. And so let me know if you can see my environment. I'll try to use magnifier as much as I can. Okay, great. So what is Fluent Bit on Windows? So Fluent Bit, again, you're collecting a ton of data. You're able to collect local logs. You're able to collect metrics. You're able to collect events. How can we go deploy that across a fleet of Windows environments and make sure that it is as useful as it can be? And so to do that, the way we're going to go grab this file is we'll come into the Fluent Bit documentation for Windows, and we will go and grab the package, which is up here under installation packages. And with these installation packages, you have exe zips that are available to you. You have some checksums, so you can do a check against that. And as Windows has been building more and more ARM, or you can start deploying Windows on ARM. I believe there's even a brand new Windows chip that's coming out with ARM. You can go grab all of these installers, download and install from there. So I grabbed the exe right here, and you basically, as you do in Windows, you can do a silent install, you can do a regular install, and what this will do, I just ran it here a little bit ago. We'll go through the file system a little bit. Is within the C drive under program files, you'll find a Fluent Bit directory. And if you're used to Fluent Bit on Linux, none of this is going to look too strange to you, right? You have your bin directory that actually contains the binary. You have your conf directory that includes the configuration. Then you have your includes and lib directories. You, of course, also have your uninstall side as well. So once we've gone and installed this, in this case, I've done the exe, we can start to run Fluent Bit. And what I'll go ahead and do, let me cancel, cut this out. Let's clear the window. You can see I'm in the directory of Fluent Bit bin. Is just like you would on a Linux box. We can run the XC or exe. We can put some command line properties on top of it. So in this case, I'm running Fluent Bit 2.2, the latest version of Fluent Bit. If you missed that session of what's new in it, there's a good recording of it. But I'm going to go ahead and print a mock message of dummy, and I'm going to do that every second and print it to the standard output, which in this case is this PowerShell terminal. So very simple, easy use case with Windows, just making sure that the binary works. And here you can see it kind of works in a similar fashion to what we would expect with almost any agent that runs on top of Windows. Now let's talk in more depth about the Windows event log, because this is really where things start to get interesting. So for those who don't know, or potentially have slightly heard of Windows events or have been tasked with, hey, make sure we're collecting all of our logs, we can go to the event viewer. Let's type event here. Open this up. Let's increase the size here. Oh, a little too large. Give me 1 second. Right. Okay, maybe the magnifier is not going to work as well as I had hoped. But we can come in here within the application and we can look at, hey, here's some application logs. We have, of course, security logs. Let's go look at security logs. I think those are always fun. So we'll open up those and you can see there's 607 events. And the event viewer is going to essentially populate this entire window with all of the events that we viewed. Okay, awesome. Here we go. Let's expand this out. You can see each of these events comes in as a effectively raw XML log. So we have this data about what's going on, and we might say, hey, like we want to make sure that this gets sent to a place where we can audit it, we can correlate it, we can understand it. So we want to collect it and kind of get it off this machine. And traditionally, if you're using Windows, you might forward this to a single Windows server, and it has a collection there. You might be using a security tool or using an observability tool that can collect directly from there. And now with Fluent Bit, we can do the exact same thing. So what we're going to do here is collect logs from the Windows event log. So I'm going to go back into the file system to CONF, and we're going to edit the configuration here. I'm going to open this with Notepad. And you can see we have a pretty standard input output. It's just going to read from these couple of channels, but I really want to customize this to say, please actually read from the security channel. So I'm going to just use the documentation here to help guide me a little bit. We'll click on inputs, and we're going to choose this one called Windows Event Log Win EVT Log. Now, one of the nice things about Fluent Bit is if you're using a really old version of Windows, you can use the win log as it is, but we also have built a newer version, Win EVT log, that uses the newer API from Windows Event. So of course, Windows ships fairly frequently too. So we want to be able to, if there's cool stuff that's involved in the Windows Event log, let's go and grab that. So I'm going to copy the configuration file that's here. I'm going to just leave out this DB parameter. Paste. And you can see channel-wise, I have set up Windows PowerShell. Let's add security in here as well. So perfect. Let's go ahead and save that. Now, when I run my Fluent Bit, instead of running it with the exact input and output that I want it to run, we are going to run it with the -c command, which says, hey, please use the configuration file I'm about to use, CONF and fluentbit.com. Now, as this loads up, one thing that's important is I'm running this as administrator, right? So within the Windows event log, there are specific permissions around what you can and can't read. If I wasn't using this as running Fluent Bit as an administrator, I might run into some permission problems. So you just want to be sure if you're productionizing this, how to make sure that it runs as the proper user. Now, I'm not getting a flow of events as I expected, and the reason why is because we will read the latest events that are coming within the Windows event log. But actually, I want to grab some of the older ones just so we have some more fun data to work with. So what I'm going to do is add this parameter, read existing events. I'll click true. Go ahead, save. Now let's go back to PowerShell. Let's go ahead and stop that. Now if we restart it, boom, you can see it just being slammed with a ton of events. So let's go ahead and see if I can pause it really quick so we can grab what one of these looks like. Okay. See if we can grab one that doesn't look so crazy. Okay, this is looking a little better. Here we go. Okay. So let's grab one like this. Actually, to make this even a little easier to read, what I'm going to do, we're going to stop this, and we're going to add a format on our standard out plugin. So within standard out, you can also set formats. What you're seeing here is the message pack format that's there by default. And we're going to add JSON. So we get a nice JSON output. I'll put it into a JSON viewer. That's going to be nicer to view and see. So let's save this. And this thing is still going pretty crazy. You know, as expected, right? We had 600 events. I'm going to do the fun thing and just kill it. And we will run another PowerShell here, no problem. And let's go into the file path that we had. And we'll use the latest configuration. Okay, that looks, I mean, it's not much better, but it does give us this so we can copy and paste it and then view it in a nice little JSON. So let's go up here. See if I can find one event that is in here. Here we go. Now let's just copy a bunch of it. And what we'll go to here, little JSON formatter. Let's just use something else. This. And I think it'll be a little incorrect because I just grabbed a big swath in between a couple messages. That's fine. Well, let's find the ones that are actually okay. Let's open this up to take the whole page. Okay. Cool. So within this, you can see this thing is pretty heavy with respect to how the event is structured. But one thing that's important is when we look at the raw Windows event log, that is coming in as an XML. So it's coming in as an XML file. Now, Fluent Bit automatically is going to convert that into essentially a JSON-esque type of conversion. So, you know, you have, for example, here, a provider name field with what that provider is. You can see that it has time created, event record ID. So these become fields where if you're sending this to an index-based store or columnar store, it's going to index on those keys and values that it's essentially creating. Yeah, here it's, you know, obviously the format is a little wonky because of me copying and pasting from the middle, but at least to get the point of, hey, we're taking this really high fidelity raw event at XML that's 30 years of work and have brought it into a little bit of JSON without doing much work, right? You could see the line of config that I have here is fairly small, right? It's setup, Windows PowerShell, security, maybe even if we get rid of the security one, I think that one is fairly noisy. We can potentially see something a little better here. So we'll go ahead and cut that. Let's see. That gives us a little bit nicer. Not much, but again, this is something you can see how quick it is to add a new channel, add a new Windows event log that we want. And this is important because many times within Windows, we don't have the luxury of just a straight file binary format that we can go and read. We have to go grab it from this WinLog event. So let me go ahead and copy that. Let's now go back up here. This one looks much more fun to go look at, right? Now you can see, right? We have string inserts, we have our message, we have our computer name, and it's an actual log versus something that's or something that gives you a view on this. Really nice question. Hey, is there a way to collect Windows event logs from remote Windows machines like you can do with Fluent D? So remote Windows of event collection. Yeah, we actually have just added a feature to this. So essentially, within a Windows server, you can forward your Windows event to another server. So we added this feature in our enterprise side, and as we bake that, we'll look at placing it into the open source side as well. But yes, that's there in the enterprise version of Fluent Bit, and we'll look to add it to the open source Fluent Bit in the roadmap as we make sure it works with the functionality intended. Okay, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about other logs, right? There's instead of just these Windows events, we may have a full-on set of Windows logs within our system. And as I like to do everything super live, let's go find a fun file that we can go read here as well. So let's look. Maybe Amazon has some fun logs that we might be able to look at, some text. Yeah, maybe we could read this notice of all the stuff that is here. Why not, right? It's some text. It effectively could be a log file. So let's go read that. Now, the nice thing about Fluent Bit, because it's available on Linux, it's available on Mac, it's available on Windows, the configuration that we would use to go and tail that log is fairly similar. So we could say input here, or we could put tail. Now the difference is going to be the path name. So the path name is not going to be, var log syslog like it is in Linux. It's going to be the pathway of this specific file. So let's see, copy as path. Let's go ahead and paste. And we're going to say similar to the logs that we have in the side of Windows event log. We have to, we'll tail the file if there's new events, etc. But let's read from head true, and then let's go ahead and save that. And let's go and run Fluent Bit again. I will close that down. Just to clear things up a little bit, I'm going to comment out the Windows event log, but of course you can read both of them as two separate streams of events, no problem. I'll go ahead and save that. And if we run the same thing that we were running before, it's going to go in and start to look at the file and say, hey, what is going on with it, and how do I start reading from it? Let's see. Did I do something incorrect here? Maybe let me get rid of this particular. Save that. There we go. And obviously I didn't do anything with respect to multi-line or anything like that. I just took every single line as a log file. So let's just grab a bunch of this so we can put it into that JSON formatter. Apologies, I'm not able to copy that well. There we go. Okay, perfect. So yeah, obviously there's multiple JSON elements because we're copying a bunch of this stuff. But a couple things that are also good to see here as well is one of the challenges with logs is they are so raw sometimes that we just have raw strings. There's no particular format for this type of log, right? There is something here with, hey, this list of conditions. I mean, this is literally a legal notice that ships with your Amazon virtual machine. No one is creating a parser for something like that. Maybe someone is, but at least in the context of right now, we're not looking at parsing this or doing some transformations, adding key value pairs. But because when Fluent Bit collects logs, Windows Event, with raw logs like this, it converts it into message pack. We get some implicit format that we can then use to do a transformation, do a parsing rule, do a conversion, all sorts of things. So we have the date as one field, and you can see the other field as log. And log now represents that raw piece of text that we've gone and captured from. So the nice thing is if you have a local file to the server, I see someone's asked a great question. Hey, I've got some Exchange transport logs that are written to a local file. How can we send that to Fluent Bit or Calyptio? Well, great. Like if it's written to the local file system, just kind of like I did here, where I said, let's go find where that is. Let's add this little input section here. It's going to go and capture it and then adhere to the output side. We can add parsers in here. We can add some multi-line logic. All of that stuff is available similar to how it is within the Linux side of the aspects. So let me, in fact, click here. Let's just go to the tail documentation. And if we want, we can, add many of these different pieces. Obviously, if you have things like iNotify, which are very, very specific to Linux, that is not going to be something here that's going to work. But yes, that's a little bit on how this tail works on top of raw files plus Windows events all in one. Okay, let's talk a little bit about metrics because this is one of the new exciting places that we've been working on with Fluent Bit. And the use case here is I have an agent for logs and I have an agent for metrics. How do I continue to operate both, or do I need to continue to operate both? And the second part is if I do have that second metric agent, it might not conform to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation standards or open aspects that I want, which might be on OpenTelemetry or Prometheus. And I might have to run something like Windows Exporter or something else to go grab those metrics. So what we've done within Fluent Bit is the team at the Prometheus team has worked really, really hard. The Windows Exporter team has worked really, really hard in open source, building this fantastic way of collecting and exposing in a Prometheus or open metrics format all these different metrics, things like CPU, memory, disk, networking, very similar to the Linux side, as well as things like logons, services, paging files, metrics. So say, for example, we want to collect how many logons there are in a specific server. We can start adding all of these different things as metrics, collect them, expose them over an HTTP port, and curl them, have them as part of a Prometheus view. So how do we go do that? Well, similar to how we've added additional event logs or event tailing capability, we just add another input. So here, I'm just going to comment out the path so we keep things pretty clean. And go ahead and put input here. And we will choose the name of this plugin. So I'll scroll down. It's just called Windows Exporter Metrics. I'm going to choose a larger scrape interval. I think the demo has 2 seconds. I'll choose 60. We'll just we'll keep the tag as default there, no problem. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and quit out of Fluent Bit. And let's run. Okay. Now, after about 1 minute, it is going to start pouring all of these different metrics around CPU, network, logical disk, system, memory, paging file, all into our standard out. And actually, if I have format JSON, that might not work. So let's restart that. It's probably because I don't have a tag. Let's add the exact config here. Okay, there we go. So this is a ton of information. So effectively what we're doing is we're grabbing every service, every CPU, every memory, every single device that's hooked up to this Windows machine, and we're asking the OS, hey, what metrics do you have? What metrics do you have? What metrics do you have? So this, I mean, obviously you can tell this is a massive, massive, massive amount of data. So one of the big things here is the ability to really pick and choose exactly what device or what you're looking for. For example, here, we could choose what Windows service that we want to collect from, add things like filtering in the collection itself, so adding a where clause, adding things like different collectors. So if we don't want all the metrics and we just want CPU, for example, we'll stop this craziness real quick. And we'll say here, metrics, all we care about is CPU. We can then do that instead of having this constant state of blasting every CPU, every service metric. So now we have CPU that's available, and we can then take this, and if we want to export it over a port, just like we do in Linux, we can copy that. We can keep standard out the way it is. And now if we come over here to the web browser and go to 2021, metrics, we now have all the metrics that were there. And if we refresh this page, you can see it updating here. So if we are pulling in those metrics, we're scraping those metrics, we can do that. The nice thing here too with Fluent Bit is we support pushing these metrics. So if you want to do a direct remote write to a service that supports that, that can be done with, I'm trying to think of some services here. Maybe you have Grafana Cloud, maybe you have New Relic. They support Prometheus endpoints, and you can direct write these metrics as a push to some of those services. Or if you have maybe a Cortex, an Amazon managed Prometheus, one of those systems, you can push to that. And then from there, you can also push via OTel metrics. So one of the nice things here is we can also export directly into an open telemetry format with these metrics. So let me go ahead and reset this zoom. Perfect. Okay. And a couple of good questions coming in. So, hey, could you show a where clause on the inputs of metrics? Yeah, let's try to do it live. And let me answer the second one too. Can we export direct to OpenSearch? Ah, good question. Within OpenSearch, I believe you can't push or remote write Prometheus. Maybe not yet. I was following a little bit of it, but you might be able to search it from the OpenSearch dashboard on top of the Prometheus style data. So there's some really good integrations OpenSearch has with all of these metrics. Highly recommend taking a look there. But then yes, we could have it so that they could go in and pull that. And then another question before we attempt the where clause: are these metrics grouped in the same way on Performance Monitor? Oh, that's a great question that I actually am not 100% sure on. Let's take a look. So for those who aren't too familiar with it, Performance Monitor gives you a bunch of views of specific different aspects of Windows. And let's see if I can look at a system. Maybe we can look at the CPU. What is this? Processor time. So processor time here. If I was to guess, I do think that you might be able to find metrics that are similar, but they might have slight variations compared to what is shown here in Performance Monitor. And the reason that I believe that's the case is because in Fluent Bits, we are conforming to what Windows Exporter has done and brought about with its formatting, how it counter, gauge, histogram, and everything works versus potentially conforming more to Performance Monitor. Yeah, good question. Probably good for the Windows Exporter side. Okay, now let's give an attempt at the where clause. No promises, but why not? Why not give it a shot here? Okay, let's do this. So here's the where clause. And let's open up our config. we.service, not .we, but where. And I like the idea of looking at a status that is not okay. So let's do that. Save that. Turn that off. And right now I have it scoped down to metrics. So I'm going to say, if it's easy, let's also add the service side. Yes. So let's see service. And let's not add any spaces between that. Let's do something like that. Okay, let's give it a shot. So this should give CPU and service metrics for anything that doesn't have a good status. I guess I didn't check to see if anything is showing a status of not okay. Let's try that again. Maybe something a little bit more fun instead of this. We can say if status is okay. And let's try this. I wonder if I'm getting any service metrics whatsoever. Just pop this out. And we might just jump into the next section if I can't get it. I will say though, looks like there is some really good docs on some examples here for excluding. There is the usage of how you can coordinate this with WMI queries. So, from a WMI query, basically, what does the actual query look like? And here's some examples of including and excluding. So it does look like it's there. Maybe I can do one where we have a name at least. Let's do that. Let's choose SSH agent or something. Put a bracket around it. And we'll choose name. Select that one here. Sure, let's use term service. Why not? This thing's going wild. Let's kill it and start it again. Oh, you can see it says W service is not finished, ignoring. So yeah, looks like you'll want to do a little bit of testing, try here, but there is some good stuff here. It's conquered me, so I'll take a pause at it for now. But let's get into the last side of it, which I think is really important, which is the processing piece of it, right? So within Fluent Bit, we can of course go and collect a bunch of this data, and we can forward it on. But we can also do some of the aspects that are required, like, hey, why don't we add a file? Let's add some additional logic on top. And there's a few ways we can do that. So for those who are familiar with Fluent Bit, we have a set of pre-built filters that you can add in the configuration. So things like, hey, we want to maybe add a record, add a modifier. One of my favorites is the grep field. So say we want to go and include something that only has the following regex, we can do something like that. And of course, if there's something that is fairly complex or requires a bit more type of parsing, conditional statements, we can also use Lua. So within Fluent Bit, leveraging Lua script to go in and say, hey, this is what I want to do. Here's how it can work. So these are some of the ways. Let's go and give an attempt to do a quick type of filter. Maybe we can choose something that at least I see a fairly good amount. Is like, hey, how do I add a we might already have hostname in Windows Event Log, but maybe we don't have it within all the raw logs that we're collecting. So I'm going to get rid of that. We're going to turn off the Windows Exporter metrics. And we'll just use something like the tail plugin. Now, on top of that, let's add a tag file. Now let's add a filter. And I'm going to go back to the documentation, and we'll go into the modify field. Within this, let's go add a host name. Let's see, host name. Is that there? It's not. Maybe it's in record modifier. Yeah, here we go. So record modifier, match file. Save that. And let's see how this does. We got to open up PowerShell again. And I misspelled it. So let's go fix that real quick. And here you can see for every single record, we've added the host name. So really easy, fast way to kind of do some of this basic logic. And then if we want to do something way more in depth, right, potentially do something like, hey, I only want to keep these 5 Windows events or something similar. Having the ability to use one of the filters like like Lua and say, hey, from a nested side, if this dot this equals blah 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 blah, then go ahead and keep the event. Otherwise, we potentially don't want it. So you get a lot of that that ability. And as we talked about in the collection side, because things essentially get JSONified or put into a structure where you have a log or you have a key and a value, you can leverage that to your advantage when you are choosing how to build maybe a very small processing rule on top of this type of operating system and whatnot. Okay, so maybe just in summary, I know we've been going here for a while, but what we've done, we've installed Fluent Bit onto a Windows server. We ran and collected Windows Event Logs. We collected some Windows files, some regular text files. We did some small enrichment on top of those files, like with hostname as an example. We also then collected Windows metrics. We attempted to filter those metrics a bit more of a user on-log error versus what's going on here, the format, everything. Need to take a deeper dive into the documentation. But yeah, essentially we've been able to show all of this being from a collected side, and conversely into collecting and then routing that to the appropriate destination. And I will say the other fun part about when having something like Fluent Bit here versus a maybe an alternative is we don't have to go Windows directly to Windows. What we're able to then do is start sending logs to places that we can then use. We can do some additional conversion. If we send it to Linux and we want to put some of the Linux filters on there, maybe WebAssembly, maybe something more enriched with Lua, we have all the capability to do that with when we route that to other tools. So say, for example, let's go back here. What I'll do is I will send this to what we call clip to core, which has ingestion and a bunch of processing, a UI, all that stuff around Fluent Bit. I'll talk about at the end. Well, I'll say, let's go collect all of that stuff we were grabbing from Windows Event Log. And instead of sending it to standard out and Prometheus Exporter, we'll also add a output here. Put forward. So taking that raw message pack and shooting it along, we'll choose the host. And if I remember correctly, what the host is, grabbing the IP address right now. Let's choose that. Port. we can go ahead and save that. In fact, I'll just turn off standard out so it doesn't interrupt this screen. Make sure that's saved. Now all those logs are going into a central place where I can then process it. Doesn't have to be Windows, doesn't have to be Linux. And so there's one issue. I didn't put a match here, so we'll put match star. And now we'll try again. And if I share my screen here, you can see we are now receiving all of these logs coming in from Windows from that host. So we have a different instance of Fluent Bit running that's collecting logs. In this case, I'm using Ecliptic Core. It's receiving all the forward events. This is running on Linux in my cloud environment. And now I have the ability to go do any of the processing, conversion, streaming, etc., on top of all these forwarded events instead of trying to go and do all of that on the agent side. So you have that ability to separate the architecture as well and compatibility across Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever it may be, which can be really, really powerful. Okay.